Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Brian Comiskey, Consumer Technology Association, and they're also the producer of CES to discuss trends in the cybersecurity ecosystem and what to watch ahead of CES 2022. Brian, will be exciting to get everyone all back together and talk about these trends. But before we get into CES, tell us about Consumer Technology Association and how it is involved in the thematic index space.
Of course. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on, Jill. As North America's largest technology trade association, CTA is the tech sector. Our members are the world's leading innovators, from startups to global brands, helping support more than 18 million American jobs. And as you said, CTA owns and produces CES, which we're excited to be back in person in Vegas from January 5th through 8th in 2022. So between the combination of our members as well as the ability to produce CES, CTA has been able to offer a unique perspective on technology research, producing market forecasts, conducting consumer sentiment studies, writing white papers, and even developing the standards around emerging technology categories. So as a result, since 2010, CTA has partnered with Nasdaq to develop thematic indices across numerous technology segments, including cloud computing, AI, robotics. And of course, during Cybersecurity Awareness Month, it's important to mention our cybersecurity index, known as the Nasdaq CTA Cybersecurity Index.
All right. And Brian, what are the more important trends in cybersecurity, and what impact has COVID-19 had on this and the evolution of these trends?
Of course. So to understand the key trends in cybersecurity, you have to take a bit of a step back and look at the evolution of the digital economy over the last 18 months. The great push to digital during COVID-19 fundamentally altered the operation of enterprises and how consumers navigated their daily lives. On that enterprise side, the majority of the workforce, about 64%, adopted remote working during the pandemic, and 70% of companies are expected to continue some form of in-person and remote work blend after the pandemic concludes. On the consumer side, one of my favorite statistics is around content consumption, so streaming services. It took Netflix, for example, 7 years to hit 50 million subscribers. When Disney Plus launched during the pandemic, it only took them 5 months to hit the 50 million subscriber mark. So just a massive surge to the digital interaction between enterprises, consumers, and then of course students. We had 250 million students go online in 2-week span during the pandemic. So when you have this rapid digitalization of both the enterprise and daily consumer life in the wake of the pandemic, it's the ultimate stress test for the cloud. And we were able to answer, is the cloud capable? Is it reliable? Now we're asking the question, is the cloud secure? For example, in a 9-month span in 2020, Zscaler identified and stopped 6.6 billion threats inside the cloud. And there was a 150% increase in ransomware attacks last year, and we've already surpassed that this year. So what we're seeing is a massive increase in threats and attacks within the cloud. So what are the trends being developed to stop them? First, identity-first security lies at the center of sort of strategies for enterprises. This is effective monitoring of authentication to help spot any sort of attacks. Think multi-factor authentication. So when you get that push notification to your phone when you log in, that's one great strategy to avoid some of these attacks. Another is zero trust. Rather than necessarily technology, this is a change in principle with the idea of not trusting anyone within your your own network. So think of it like need to know access or need to know policy in the military, where there's no assumption that even though an email may be coming from someone outside the organization, that should automatically be trusted. And this is critical because a massive cybersecurity attack in 2017 was the result of someone opening the wrong email. The other major area is you're going to see an increase in cyber spend around trends. So worldwide by 2022, Gartner estimates there will be $134 billion spent by enterprises around cybersecurity, meaning half of large enterprises will be spending $1 million or more on security. And they're going to have to increase their staffing around to make sure that they address these issues as well. So you're going to see 40% of boards of directors have a dedicated cybersecurity committee overseen by a qualified board member, and 82% of enterprises planning on adding security staff. So more experts, more budget, and of course, artificial intelligence is going to play a role here as well. It's estimated that about, if you took all of the cybersecurity professionals in the world, you could only fill 60% of the roles. That's a substantial workforce gap.
Right. And we're seeing not even just cybersecurity, but technology in general. But Brian, I'm glad you brought up with Zscaler and all the threats that they did help to stop, because I feel like particularly in the media, we only hear about the bad things that happen. Meanwhile, every day they're saving us from millions and billions of cybersecurity attacks. So that was encouraging to hear. Can you discuss the cybersecurity ecosystem for a bit and provide an overview on the key company types in the industry?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when you think about it, it's quite diverse space because, as you mentioned, and we've talked about, there's so many threats emerging and so many different types of categories of technology necessary to address these threats. So it's really important to step back and identify really 5 key types of companies. The first being antivirus and malware software companies. So these are like your Avast or your Norton LifeLocks. They're designed to deal with a bit more of those older, more established threats. People may have heard the word Trojans or zero-day exploits. Secondly, you have specialized software and services. So think very targeted cloud or zero trust style companies. Cloudflare comes to mind here. They actually debuted a zero trust browsing service. Beyond that, you have specialized middleware. So this is like software glue, bridging the gaps between your applications, your tools, your databases to provide unified cybersecurity services to users, kind of like the conductor of an orchestra of systems. You have your hardware, so companies like Cisco building those physical cybersecurity products. And then the last category is integrators and managed service providers. And this is a category that makes the Nasdaq CTA Cybersecurity Index a bit different than others, where these are companies providing outsourced monitoring and management of security devices and systems, lending their technical expertise and consulting services. So think your Accentures, your BAE Systems, your Lidos, these companies that are on the verge or have already won massive contracts from the public and private sector to really navigate this new normal around cybersecurity.
All right. And finally, in the last minute here, Brian, what other trends is CTA seeing ahead of CES 2022?
Well, of course, it's no surprise that in the wake of announcement by Facebook that they might be changing their name to reflect the metaverse, we're seeing a lot of trends of the evolution of interactive online and on-demand consumer products and services really start to build and shape a nascent metaverse. And a lot of that's stemming around 4 key areas that we're going to see a lot of at CES: e-commerce, fintech, and even cryptocurrency, content and entertainment consumption. So look for our C space at CES to really show the emerging trends around content consumption and gaming, particularly. And finally, digital health, because it's becoming more and more important for technology solutions to empower consumers over their own healthcare outcomes.
All right, Brian, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.